Good morning to everybody. I'm glad that you're able to join us today. The purpose of our visit this morning is to prepare for our delegate process. It will be virtual again this year. Before we start, let me explain to you why, because I've already gotten questions. If convention is in person, why is the delegate process in person? The reason why is because we're still restricted on capacity. And because of that, when we first started planning convention, we didn't know what our capacity was going to be, but we knew that there was a chance that it was going to be less than the number of delegates that we have in the state. And obviously we cannot prevent chapters from voting and participating in the delegate process. So that was the main reason why we chose to go virtual with it one more year. The second reason is because even though we got a capacity increase for convention, a lot of school districts are still not letting their schools travel to convention. And so again, we cannot prevent chapters from being able to vote and participate in FFA business because of capacity issues or because of travel restrictions from schools. So that's why we chose to do it virtual one more time. It's the same reason why we're doing all of our nominating committees virtual one more time. It was because of the overnight issues with the travel issues. We're not going to prevent students from being able to participate and vote, and that we're not going to stop your chapter from being able to have a voice in the delegate process. So that's why it's virtual one more time. Hopefully things are getting back to normal. By next year, this will all be done. The good thing is we did have practice doing this last summer, so this should be more smooth and effective and efficient in how it goes. So that is our purpose today, to talk about how the delegate process will work this year. And of course, as we go through, if you have questions, make sure you ask. So for this short meeting this morning, if you're not talking, please keep yourself muted so we don't have background noise. If you do have a question, it says type it in the chat box. It's going to be hard for me to check the chat while I'm going. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself, interrupt me and ask. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions as we go about anything. There's no silly questions, I promise. I want to be as clear and transparent as we can possibly be. If your connection drops for the internet, it's fine. Just come back to the link again and rejoin. I'll let you back in. And if you have any major kind of issues, that's my cell number. Please don't share that with anybody. Give me a call if for some reason you absolutely cannot rejoin. So if there's no questions, we will go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to do is let you know who our teacher coordinators are going to be. These teachers serve in leadership roles on each committee. They serve to provide guidance to the committees. We have 4 committees this year. Because we're virtual again, just because of the way that the year has gone, our 4 area advisors will be serving in those roles. So Ms. Green was heading up Committee 1, which was the committee to review COLT conferences. Mr. Trish was over Committee 2, evaluating the roles of area officers. Mr. Wilhite was with Committee 3, evaluating the need for an at-large state vice president. And Ms. Anderson was with Committee 4, looking at the effectiveness of virtual events. So as we go through this process, you can even reach out to these area advisors if you have questions. They've been working with the area officers and preparing for these 4 committees. Big shout out to these area advisors. They've done an excellent job of helping to run this process. They were at SLDC back in March. This would not be possible without the work that they do. So I'm extremely appreciative of their help in making the delegate process work. So to make sure that everyone understands how this works, let's quickly go through what Louisiana FFA's delegate process is, what's the purpose of it, and we'll make sure to answer any questions that you may have regarding why we do this and how it works. The purpose of our delegate process is to make sure that FFA chapters are encouraged to create positive change in FFA. Prior to this process starting, Louisiana FFA utilized standing committees every year. So we had a livestock committee, we had an awards committee, we had a publicity committee, we had a camp committee. I think there was a budget committee. There were like 5 or 6. It was the same committees every single year. They typically would come up with the same proposals every year. It was getting very stagnant. And so following the model that National FFA changed to probably 15 or 20 years ago, we reformulated our delegate process to make sure FFA chapters felt like they had more of an ability to create change in FFA when change was needed. It's also very organized, so it's formal, it's institutionalized. There's a structure that we follow every year to make sure that it's fair. That also leads it to being very transparent. It's open, there's nothing hidden. Every chapter has the opportunity to proposed delegate issues, every chapter has the opportunity to discuss and debate those in our delegate process. And then maybe most importantly, it's student-led. These committees are run by area officers who come to SLDC every March. It's students from each chapter that debate and discuss and vote on all of these issues. So we're hitting all the important parts of what democratic organization should be, and we're also making sure that we follow the time-honored FFA tradition of being student-led. So those are the four main purposes of our delegate process. It's how it's laid out, it's how it works, and we've had some really good success with it since it was implemented back in 2006 in its current form. It's a year-round process. It officially starts every year in every school year in November when we open up the call for ideas for chapters to share those committee ideas. This stays open through February of the school year, and then in March of every year, our area officers come together at State Leadership Delegates Conference, and they review all of those issues. Typically, in a normal year, area officers will prioritize and vote on which of those issues will become for committees. This year, we didn't have issues submitted by chapters. I know a big part of that is because with COVID, it's just been difficult for people to meet. Our state officers submitted 4 issues this year that the area officers then formed into committees. And so those issues are reviewed, the final list is determined, and the leadership delegates, which are composed of area officers, they put themselves on committees. So we do have several area officers on the call here today who will be serving in those leadership positions next week during the committee process. Also at SLDC, the area officers come up with questions that they want state staff to research. All of the research has now been shared on our website. I'll show you that here in a few minutes of where you can find it. They were really good questions. It's always fun for me to do this. I like going big and find the history of why we do the things we do. What are the statistics on programs that we have? It's really beneficial to us in the state office even to know where can we improve, what are we doing well, what do we have to look forward to. So that takes place from March to May, and then we share that with leadership delegates and with chapters. So again, in a normal year, this would all take place at state convention. Obviously this year we're doing it a couple weeks prior to make sure everyone has a chance to vote. But in a normal year, the committees would meet at convention. We'd have our big delegate assembly there. Right after convention is done, depending on what the delegates vote to do, state staff will take all of those committee reports, all that recommendation, we send it to our executive committee for them to take further action on. The executive committee typically meets in September. That's made up of the 10 state officers, the 4 area advisors, and the 4 LATA vice presidents. They'll take executive action on whatever recommendations the students propose at state convention. And depending on what those recommendations were, sometimes they have to come back to state convention the following year. So for example, if the students at convention propose anything involving a constitutional amendment, the executive board would have to forward that back for the students to vote on again at the next convention to follow up. Some things the executive board can just take action on depending on if the students give them the authority to do that. Sometimes it has to come back again for a follow-up. So as you can see, this process is long, but it's designed to be that way. It's designed to be deliberative. It's designed to take time so that we can make sure that all actions that are taken are good, to make sure that changes that are implemented are necessary, to make sure that chapters have the opportunity to see what's going on and to be a part of it so that it's open, fair, and transparent. Does anyone have questions on the delegate process? I know that's a very quick overview of how it works. We talked about those 4 area advisors who are serving as teacher coordinators. More specifically, what are their roles on the committee? They do their job like a normal FFA advisor would. They're there to advise the students on the committee, mainly the area officers, but also if delegates have questions, they're there to answer those also. They help to guide the process through the committee work. The 4 area advisors, they don't debate, they don't vote, they don't have a say in decisions that are made. They're there to make sure that the process is followed and that the process is fair for every delegate and for every chapter participating in the process. Collectively, the area advisors serve as a steering committee on these procedural matters. So I will visit with them periodically throughout the year, and we reevaluate and make sure that our processes are fair, that they're equitable, and that they're accessible to all FFA chapters. They also serve as teachers on the committees. They facilitate member learning. There's an outstanding learning opportunity for delegates who serve in these committee positions to learn about parliamentary procedure, to learn more about FFA tradition, to learn more about technical agriculture and FFA content that comes through these committees. So it's the teacher's responsibility to make sure that all of our delegates understand what's going on and that the members learn something as part of the process. They're guardians. They protect the process protocol. They make sure the protocol is not violated. They make sure that no chapter is treated unfairly, that no member is treated unfairly. And then very importantly, they have to be impartial. Area advisors know that they cannot allow their own personal bias or their personal chapter interest to take any kind of precedent over what the committee is doing. They're, again, there to be a process protocol protector, to be a teacher, but not to be pushing an agenda or a viewpoint. And they don't do this. All four of these area advisors are really good at doing their job and doing it well. Then we go to our leadership delegates. These are delegates that are made up of area officers. You have to be an area officer to become a leadership delegate, and they're selected at SLDC every year in March. The role of the leadership delegate, first and foremost, is to facilitate the committee. So they lead the work of each of these committees. We're going to look at their leadership positions here in just a second, but it's the role of the area advisor to make sure that from start to finish, the committee is following the process. The committee is moving forward. They're encouraging robust discussion and debate. They're ensuring that every member has the opportunity to speak by using parliamentary procedure. And they're going to make sure that by the time the committee work is done, the committee has a good committee report that the entire committee, or the majority of the committee, will agree to. From those area officers, they elect their leadership position. So each committee will have one chair. The chair manages the entire process. The chair has to be fluent in parliamentary procedure. If they're not, they can't be the chair. They also can't come from the chapter that submitted the proposal, which again, this year it's not applicable since the state officers proposed all of them. But this is out of fairness. We don't want the chairman to come from the chapter that submits the proposal and then they can be seen as pushing an agenda on that committee. So we avoid that. We also elect a vice chair who assists the chair. They can preside if the chair has to step out. They also need to be fluent on parliamentary procedure. They also cannot be from the chapter that proposed the delegate issue. Each committee has a secretary. The secretaries are keeping up official documentation of the committee. They're going to type up the committee report. They're going to keep minutes. So really your committee can only go as fast as your secretary can type, and we'll make sure the committees know to not rush the process. Let's make sure we document everything that goes on. We're getting a good official report. We elect a sentinel. They keep the time. Every committee this year is going to be limited to 2 hours to make sure we get finished on time and that we're moving along. So the sentinel will be responsible for keeping on time. When we're physically at convention, they're also the manager of the room, like a sentinel would do, making sure that everyone's comfortable, making sure that order is being maintained. The rest of the area officers serve as discussion group leaders. This is an extremely important role because within each committee, you're going to have an opportunity to break out into smaller groups and discuss smaller pieces of the topic. This is where we really start to generate ideas that are going to be put into a committee report. So we might have a big broad topic that might have 4 or 5 subtopics under it. If we stay in just one big committee the whole time, it's going to be difficult to get good ideas on those 4 or 5 subtopics. So these discussion group leaders will break off and each of them will discuss one of those topics. And every delegate will have the opportunity to speak about every topic to make sure that we're generating as good creative ideas as possible. It also makes it easier for a lot of delegates. They're more inclined to speak their mind in a smaller group than they are if they're in front of 80 people in a committee. So it's very helpful in generating ideas. Does anyone have questions about the roles of our area officers? Now let's turn our attention to how the committee process is going to look next week. Again, this is going to be virtual for 1 more year. It's going to start on Wednesday. We'll have 2 committees meet on Wednesday, 2 will meet on Thursday. But for all 4 committees, they're going to follow a very similar process to this. Now, this is what we have recommended to the area officers to follow. It gives them a framework. The time might be off by a few minutes here or there, but in general, this is the order that each committee is going to follow. So when the committee starts, you need to be on time. The first committee meeting starts at 8 o'clock each day. The second one starts at 10 o'clock each day. You need to be on time so that we can start on time. So the chair will call roll. They'll call the meeting to order. They'll take roll, make sure we have a count of how many delegates are there. We know how many chapters have registered to participate in the delegate process. Therefore, we know how many are on each committee. It's important if you have registered to participate that you show up, because if not, we're not going to have quorum, and that's really going to cause problems for the process this year. We need at least 50% plus one of our committees and of our general delegate assembly to show up. So if you've registered, please make sure you attend next week. Once we call roll, there'll be an opportunity for an introduction of what the committee's purpose is. The chair is going to explain why the committee was formed. What are the purposes of the committee? What are we looking at with the committee? They can answer questions at that time if the delegates have any. And then we'll do about 20 minutes of a full committee discussion. This is an opportunity to start the conversation. So where's the conversation going to go? What is the opinion of the delegates who are in the meeting? This will also help the discussion group leaders have a good idea of where to direct those small group discussions when they break out into those later on in the meeting. You need to follow normal parliamentary procedure here. All of your discussion needs to be directed towards the chair. Again, it's going to be virtual, so we'll discuss virtual procedures of how to do this, but it's still following parliamentary procedure. So delegates cannot talk to each other necessarily. You're definitely not debating each other. You're directing all of your discussion towards the chair so that we stay in order. After that, we'll break off into small group discussions. This will be about 30 minutes. So those discussion group leaders will take small groups of students to facilitate into smaller topics. Did my screen go away, or can you still see it?
You can still see it.
Okay, on my side, it went black. I'm not sure why it did that. If for some reason it goes away, let me know. So anyway, the small group leaders, they'll have the delegates, they'll get their opinions together, they'll get their ideas together. Once that time is over, they'll come back together for another full committee discussion. Whatever ideas are generated during those small groups, the discussion leaders are going to present those to the full committee. That's going to help you now start to formulate your committee report. So you're going to take those ideas, you're going to start compiling them, putting them together, and you'll get good ideas for your report. After about 25 minutes of that, then you'll start actually formulating your rec. Though delegates are going to have to start determining what's going to go onto the written report. The best way to do this, what I recommend, is that you vote on one recommendation at a time. So for example, if we're discussing a report that has to do with, I don't know, hosting an FFA only livestock show at state convention. Let's say that's somebody's idea. It's a committee report. And there might be three parts of that. One might be to do pigs, one might be to do sheep, one might be to do goats. I would recommend that you vote on those one at a time. So a delegate would need to move and say, I move that the report contains the livestock show be hosted at this livestock show. Debate on that, vote on that. If it's approved, put it in your report. Another delegate would say, I move that we host a beef show at this state convention livestock show. You debate it, you discuss it, you vote on it. If it passes, put it in the report. I would do one at a time, because if you try to take care of 5 or 6 all at once, it's going to get really confusing. Delegates are not going to know what they're discussing and voting on. So whatever ideas you come up with in these small group discussions, I would vote on them one at a time to put them into your committee report. Once you've got that report done, you've got a bulleted list of however many recommendations you're going to have. You need to take one final discussion and vote on the full report. So a delegate needs to stand up and say something like, I move that we accept that report as written. You can discuss it, debate it one more time, and then when you vote on it, if it passes by majority vote, that is the committee report of the committee. The area advisors and the leadership delegates have been trained on how to do that. I will also be sitting in on each of these committees, so if you have questions about process and procedure, I'll be more than happy to help you as you go through. That shouldn't take more than 10 minutes, because by this point, all those recommendations have been voted on anyway. Does anyone have questions regarding the committee process? We talked about parliamentary procedure. Keep in mind that specific to committees, Robert's Rules of Order has certain rules that apply, and some don't apply that would normally apply in a large group meeting. So for example, in a committee, members are allowed unlimited debate. You know that following normal Robert's Rules of Order, when we just have a large gathering, you're restricted to 2 debates per motion unless those are extended or limited. In a committee, it's unlimited. and motions that would restrict that are out of order. So on a committee, you cannot move previous question. You can't limit or extend limits of debate. Members are allowed to debate per Robert's Rules of Order as many times as they want on any topic within a committee. And that's common sense because your committee is a smaller group of people. It's designed to foster more conversational style debate and discussion versus the more formality of a larger group. So if anyone on your committee tries to move these motions that are going to limit debate, they're out of order. The chair should not accept those motions. And if the chair does accept them, someone needs to move a point of order and get it corrected. So unlimited debate within a committee. There's also other motions that you cannot adopt in a committee. You can't adopt anything that's going to try to push this off. It has to be dealt with in the committee. So you can't postpone. You can't lay on the table. Obviously, you can't refer to a committee because you're already in a committee. So whatever you're discussing in your committee, it either needs to be dealt with or it's just going to go away. You're just not going to have a report. So no motions that postpone this in any way. There's no formal debate rules when you're in your small group discussion. So when the whole committee is debating, yes, you need to address the chair with all of your discussion. When you break off into those small groups, though, it's just a casual conversation. The group leader will make sure that everyone has a chance to speak, but it's not as formal as what you have in the full committee. If you are a leadership delegate, you can debate and vote if and only if you are serving as the official delegate for your chapter on that committee. So every chapter who registered was entitled to 2 delegates. If as a leadership delegate, if you're the only person from your chapter in that committee, you can debate and vote if you're not serving as chair. The chair should never debate and vote. They have to be impartial and unbiased. If you are a leadership delegate on a committee and your chapter has another person in that committee who's serving as a delegate, you cannot debate and vote. It's limited to 1 member per chapter on each of these committees. So make sure you follow those rules. Leadership delegates, you're not allowed to push the conversation in one way or the other if you're not serving as an official delegate from your chapter for that committee. Within the committee, you can have discussion. It can take place on the committee topic without a formal motion. This is really important. You don't have to have someone stand up and say, I move in order to start the debate. You can discuss the committee topic and the breakout topics without having a formal motion on the floor. You won't have a formal motion on the floor until you start moving those specific points that are going to go into the committee report. And then once you have a motion to accept the whole committee report. So just open discussion is fine. It still needs to be directed towards the chair so that it stays in order and no one's having their right to discuss be taken away. The committee topic itself is not a motion. So those 4 topics that we talked about earlier, there's one on help me out area officers. There's one on at-large state vice president. There's one on area officer duties. There's one on effectiveness of virtual events. What's the 4th one? I keep forgetting. Help me out.
Cult conference.
Cult conference. So those 4 topics, those are not motions. It's not a motion until a delegate moves it as a motion and puts it on the floor. So just keep that in mind, especially for area officers. The discussion is fine on these topics without someone actually moving the motion. Now, once it's moved, you have to limit the debate to that topic. You can't stray off from there. And again, make sure that your discussion remains germane to the committee topic. If you're discussing cult conferences, you shouldn't suddenly start talking about CDEs. It needs to be relevant to the topic so that you stay on time and so that you're not causing confusion. Does anyone have questions on how the committee process works or how parliamentary procedure works in a committee? Let's talk about now when these committee meetings will take place. So again, this is going to happen next week. We're going to have 4 committees. We're going to do 2 each day. So the first 2 will take place on Wednesday, May 26th. Committee 1, you'll meet at 8 o'clock in the morning. Committee 2 will meet at 10. The next day on Thursday, committees 3 and 4 will meet again, 8 in the morning, 10 in the morning. And then Friday on the 28th at 9 o'clock is the full statewide assembly. So this is when all of our registered delegates come together to approve these committee reports, to vote on state dues, to look at the state officers, POA and audit committee, and any other business that comes up. This is the schedule. Advisors are going to get access to this too. I'm going to email them directly so that people know. But if you're serving on one of these committees, and you'll know later today because I'm going to send the advisors the committee assignments, you'll know which one you're assigned to. and you'll get the link to it. Just make sure you show up on time. I will say this so there's no confusion. We're going to use the same link for each day. So if you're on committee 1 or committee 2, it's going to be the same Zoom link. I'm not going to send 2 separate ones. I think that'll be more confusing. So the Zoom link will just say committee meetings May 26th. You'll use the same link for both ones. Plus, that's going to help me also to not have to jump in and out of one whenever the first one finishes. Any questions on the schedule? Again, I've got the committee assignments made. They were randomly assigned. So I took the spinner wheel like we use for LDEs, and I did committee 1, 2, 3, 4, and I went down each chapter and spun it. Whichever one you landed on is where your chapter got assigned. Every chapter is assigned to 2 committees. Every chapter should send 1 delegate to each committee. 2 of the committees have 20 delegates assigned. 2 of the committees have 19 delegates assigned. So they're going to be very manageable numbers. They're not going to be large at all. Shouldn't be a problem dealing with it or managing it during Zoom. So again, later today, as soon as we're done with this, I'll share the advisors, the committee assignments, I'll share the links to Zoom, and I'll share a recording of this video too, so they can go back and see it. If you need to see it again, you'll be able to. Again, 1 delegate per chapter per committee. That's all you can have. That's all that can debate and vote on each committee. This is the procedures that will follow in the committee meeting. Zoom procedures, let me clarify. So please identify yourself in your Zoom box. So for example, if you're looking right now at Zoom, you see all of our names on here. What I need you to do is to name yourself, your chapter name, and either 1 or 2. So for example, if you're from Central Afouche, you'd name yourself Central Afouche 1 for your first committee. When you come into your next one, Central Afouche 2 for your next committee. This will be extremely important during our statewide meeting on Friday the 28th, because both delegates will be there at the same time at the statewide meeting. So for voting purposes, and so the chair, so Caleb knows who he's calling on, which chapter you're from, make sure you name yourself that way. If you don't know how to do that, if you hover your mouse over your Zoom box, you'll see a box with 3 little dots. It's like a blue box and 3 white dots in it. When you click on that, it gives you the option to rename yourself. During debate, whenever it's a formal debate, so in your committees and especially in our state delegate meeting on Friday of next week, go ahead and use the raise hand feature in Zoom to gain recognition from the chair. That's how Caleb or the committee chairs will see you to call on you. If you don't know how to do that, there should be an option at the bottom of your Zoom screen where you can click on it and it causes your hand to go up on the Zoom box. Make sure you use that. Whenever you're called on, unmute yourself and speak. When you're not speaking, keep yourself muted so that we're not getting any kind of background interference. For voting purposes, other than officer voting, we'll talk about officer elections in a minute, but for voting in committees and during the statewide delegate meeting, we'll use the polling feature in Zoom. What'll happen whenever there's a question to vote on, I'll quickly put that question together in the polling feature. When the presiding officer says that he or she is ready to do the vote, I'll pull it up and the polling feature should pop up on your screen. And you'll have the option of voting either yes or no. Most of it is just a yes or no vote. So we'll use it that way. We did this last summer, it worked really well. We can also make sure that we record the results of all of our voting that way too. It'll actually record it so I can go back and print them off. So if anybody has questions about how a vote went, we'll still have it that way. Any questions on those procedures? Okay, so we went through procedures about how to name yourself, how to do the raise hand, how to vote. Now, what should you be doing to prepare? I'm going to pull up some websites for you. All of the information about these committees we talked about earlier, the delegate research that we've done, it's all available on our website. That's the link. It's laffa.org/conv-delegates. I'm going to open this up for you here in just a second. Make sure you read all the information on that page. Visit with your advisor, talk about the committee issues, make sure you're prepared whenever you come to your committee meeting and before the statewide meeting next Friday. So let me pull this website up and show you what it looks like, show you what you should be looking for. Hold on, let me find it. There we go. Okay, you should see our state FFA website on the screen, right? Can y'all see it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you go to our website, go to association. You can click on student leadership, go to delegate process. And if you go here to the convention committees, this is one way you can get to it. You can also get to it through the state convention page. Either way will get you there. But this is the delegate process page. Here are the 4 committees that were proposed this year. You can also click and see the rationale of each one. So it'll pull up the reasoning of why the committee report was created. And of course, I just closed my page. I'll pull it back up. What you're really going to want to look at is here on the right. You see the business session agenda, the dues recommendation, and the research. The agenda, this is for our meeting next Friday, the 28th. This is our dues recommendation. We're recommending to keep dues the same. We're not raising dues. These 4 research documents you're really going to want to look at. So for example, this is committee number 1. It was about COLT conference. These are the questions that the area officers asked. We did the research. We found the answers to those questions. For the second one, this one was evaluating the role of area officers. These are the questions the area officers asked, and we found the research for them. So you can look at that for each of the 4 committees. This will give you a good background going into the committee, give you some information to use to give you help you make good educated decisions in the committees. So spend some time on these pages, make sure you're reading and you're researching. You can bring this with you during the committee meeting. I'll also have it pulled up. That way, if there's any questions, it can go back and be referenced. Does that make sense? All right, let's go back to our presentation for just a second. Let's talk about how we're going to elect our officers. Our state officer election and our area officer election will both be virtual one more time this year. State officer elections are going to be the same as we did last year. The state NOMCOM is meeting virtually on the 29th and 30th. They're going to deliberate on Memorial Day for about an hour that morning. They're going to make their slate. And at 12 o'clock, we're going to share the NOMCOM report on social media. On Wednesday, June 2nd, that is when voting will start. It's going to take place from 12 p.m. to 11:59 p.m. that night. First round will shut off. So if your chapter has 2 registered delegates, your advisor will be sent voting codes to do this. You just need to make sure you do it within the time that it's open. If you miss the opening, you're not going to be able to vote. If there's a runoff election, if that's necessary, which we got 14 candidates, so it's possible, not likely, but it's possible. If there is a runoff, it'll take place the next day, again, from 12 p.m. to 11:59. We'll make sure we announce that there's a runoff so you'll know to go vote. The cool thing this year is that the officers that are elected this year, they're going to be installed at state convention. So on that Thursday, June 10th at 10:30 at the 5th session, we'll announce them and install them. So the new state officer team is not going to know that they've been elected until they get to state convention. We announce it live, and they'll be run up on stage and installed. So in order to vote, each advisor who registered their chapter, you're going to get 2 unique voting codes. Again, this is the same as we did last year. Those voting codes will be specific to your delegate. They can only be used one time for voting. You're going to go to our website, and I'll show you here what it looks like. You're going to go to the website, you're going to enter your voting code, and it's going to be one ballot. It's going to have every office on the ballot. You're just going to select for each office position who you want to vote for. Also, with each office position, their campaign speeches will be listed there, so you can watch their speeches before you vote for them. If there's no opposition to an office, you can still vote for it, but obviously it's not necessary, but you'll still be able to click a selection on each one. And again, you can see their campaign speeches there also. So if you go to our website, let's see if this will open. I think it is, but you can't see it. Hold on. Let me show you on our website what this will look like. It's going to be laffa.org/vote. We're also going to have a red bar at the top of the screen. That'll be displayed so you won't miss it. Again, if you participated in this last year, it'll look the same way. It'll be on the website. You're going to put your access code here. So the code that I send to your advisors, you'll type it in here. Once there's an event, there's none yet. Once our web designer puts it up, you'll click on this and it'll take you to the ballot. So it's simple as that. It'll all be here on the web page. You'll be able to watch the videos, you vote, and you submit your ballot. Any questions on state officer voting? It's pretty straightforward. I believe we have one more thing to talk about. That'll be area officer voting, which will also be online, but it'll be using a different system, same as we did last year. For area officers, this is going to take place right after state convention. The area NOMCOM is going to meet the Monday after state convention on June 14th. All 4 areas will have their NOMCOMs all at the same time. Now, they'll be in separate rooms. They're not all being interviewed together, but they're all going to take place at the same time. That evening, we will release the NOMCOM reports for all 4 areas. Now, we're shooting for 6 o'clock. That's assuming we finish on time, which we should. When we did this back in the fall, we usually finished about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so this shouldn't be an issue. If for some reason we're running late, we'll announce that, but it will be announced that Monday. First round voting will take place on the Wednesday, again from 12 to 11:59. Second round voting the next day if necessary. The new officers for area will be announced on social media on Friday the 18th. For this one, you're going to do it through a form site link. This is the same thing that we did last fall for all of our area officers. Again, it's 2 delegates per chapter. You'll click on the link, you'll select your chapter, you'll make your selection, and their speeches will be there also. So let me show you this page also, what it looks like. Again, same one that we did last year. So if you participated in that voting, it should be pretty familiar to you. This was the one that we used last year for Area 4. So each area will get its own link. You'll go to the page, you'll select your chapter, whichever chapter you're from. You'll put your advisor's email address so that they know you voted, and you'll click on your selections. Now, last year for Area 4, they were all unopposed, so there wasn't a second one. But if there would have been opposition, you would have had 2 options for whichever office had opposition, and there would have been a link to watch their campaign speeches also. So you'll click through these, you'll hit submit, and it will be submitted. Now, on this one, there's not a specific voting code. You're just using this link. But what we're going to do, if you try to vote multiple times, if you try to vote more than twice, we're going to take the first 2 ballots that were submitted. So don't do that. There's a timestamp on here. I'll see how many you're trying to submit and when it was done. So you can vote 2 times. Each delegate votes once. So you get 2 ballots per chapter, if that makes sense. All right, I think we're about to the end. Does anyone have any questions about anything at all? Again, I know that this is clearly not ideal. We would much prefer to do this in person. We were wanting to do it in person this year. It's just the way that things worked out, and with restrictions that are still in place, this is going to be the most fair way to do it one more time. But I am really hopeful going forward, having an in-person convention, a camp. It looks like most things should be going back to normal with next school year. Hopefully this is the last time we have to do it virtually again. But I am thankful to everyone who's worked with us over the past, it's going on 15 months now almost, of getting all of this virtual stuff perfected. I think we're really good at it. I'm confident that it's going to be fair, that it's going to work. If you have any questions at all as we go on, please just don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. We'd be happy to help you. So if there's no other questions, that's all I have for you today. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you next week for our committee meetings.